I avoid using the word tolerance, and people are like, we are a district in which we are tolerant of everybody. And it's like, I don't ever want to be tolerated. If you tolerate me, I don't feel like you're welcoming me. I don't feel like you have open arms toward me. I feel like you're like, you can stay. You're begrudgingly. You can stay. No thanks. I'm not looking for that type of relationship. And I don't think that our children and their relationship with school, it shouldn't feel that way. They shouldn't feel tolerated. They should feel like this is where I belong. And I can tell I belong by the way that my teachers treat me, by the way my parents are treated when they come in the building, by the things that I am taught, by being able to see myself positively reflected in the curriculum, in the physical plant of the building, like on the walls, in the classroom, on the covers of the books, in the library, in the movies that we watch, in the stories that we're allowed to tell about ourselves, that someone is listening to me, to hear me, and to let me know that I belong. That to me is inclusion.
I'm Nikki Herda, and this is Bright, stories of hope and innovation in Michigan classrooms. A podcast where we celebrate our state's educators and explore the future of learning. Bright is brought to you in part by MEMIC Insurance Company, insuring the educational community for more than 70 years. Teachers and school employees visit memic.com/quote to see how much you can save. In today's episode of Bright, I chat with Dr. Bobbie Goodrum, Assistant Superintendent of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Farmington Public Schools. Bobbie shares her personal definitions of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, gets straight to the heart of why this work is so essential in education, offers a fascinating perspective on why the language we use matters, and leaves us with 3 strategies for making sure every student belongs. Dr. Goodrum, it's a pleasure to have you on the Bright podcast today. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
We're kicking off season 3 by asking everybody, can you tell me about the most interesting thing that you're doing in your district right now?
I think the most interesting thing that we're doing on our district right now is our strategic planning and the committees that we have. I think that the way that our assistant superintendent for strategic planning and innovation has set them up, they're very community oriented, meaning that there was we put up a push. We invited everybody in the community, like a social media push. It's been in the newspapers. We would like you to please participate in one of these 8 committees. And we have students on the committees too. And so it's pretty exciting, A, because of all of the stakeholders that it involves, and B, the way that we have integrated. Last year we went through a pretty intensive educational equity audit, and the way that the committees are integrating the findings from the equity audit into their strategic planning. So I really feel positive about us using data from multiple sources as well as multiple stakeholders that sometimes may not have a good representation or good voice within our district, and we were really intentional about including all those types of groups. So I'm just really excited to see the kind of goals that come out and the kind of action plans that we developed, to meet those goals and move our district forward. So I think that's pretty exciting.
That is very exciting, and I can hear in the way you're describing it just all the different communities that are being represented, and that does sound like it would create a really powerful vision. And I'm just wondering, what are you hopeful for? What kind of education can you see resulting for students?
What I'm looking forward to, and we've been talking about this so many times, families, legislators, just people in general are focused so much, say, on test scores. And test scores are an indicator, of a school district's success, I guess. But for me, like, a better indicator is really what happens to our students when they leave us. Who do they become? how many of them get vocational certificates or go to 2-year college or go to 4-year college? How many of them are persisting? How many of them are really doing what we say our mission is, which is to create, thoughtful, thoughtful and productive citizens in a changing world, global citizens? What does that look like, and how many of them are reaching that? Because yes, we can say, 85% of our students are proficient in reading or are proficient in math. And of course, you have to have those skills as well. But are we equipping our students with everything that they need in order to be, productive citizens, in a changing world, global citizens, caring citizens? And so I'm hoping that we kind of establish some monitoring systems and some metrics that help us look at that, because to me that's our purpose. So our outcomes should not just be test scores, SAT, PSAT, that type of thing, but who are these humans? Who are these humans that we are impacting and have helped create? What are they doing outside of the walls of our schools? What is our contribution to the world?
Maybe it's probably just my position that I'm in, but I've never heard that conversation, it's easier, obviously, to measure test scores, maybe. I don't know. But the act of actually attempting to capture and look at that as a metric, after they leave, are they doing all these things that we wanted for them? So that's pretty neat. I'm excited to hear more about how that goes. Can you tell me about a time in your life that you vividly remember falling in love with education?
I'm going to have to give you some context to this story. So I received my bachelor's degree was in health science and had planned on going to school to be a physical therapist and worked for a year, like in the National Rehabilitation Hospital in Washington, D.C., then moved back to Michigan and worked at a couple of rehabilitation facilities as like a physical therapy aide. Went back was accepted in PT school, went back, first day of class, sit there in my first day of class where I worked, spent an hour working to this, decided I didn't want to be there. Dropped out of PT school, was in DC. What could I do with the degree that I had? Thankfully, DC, like everywhere else on planet Earth, has a shortage of teachers, and had a program where you could be certified, especially if you had a certain amount of credits in different subjects. I was science certified because of the number of science classes that I had taken. So taught for a year. First year, I will say, was disastrous. Part of the reason that it was catastrophic was because I really went into it with the idea that I was going to do something else. So I did not invest myself into teaching. And so, but I also am a bit of a competitive kind of overachiever, really could not see myself as not doing something well. So when I had my first evaluation with my principal, who basically one of the things that she said to me, and this is a quote, is, "Do you know what you're doing?" my answer was basically no, and so as a part of the program, I was in classes, and so really toward the middle of my first year, I started taking it seriously and really investing and utilizing what I was learning in my classes, and really thinking about the impact that I was going to have on the lives of these students. I worked at a school in DC where all the students kind of came from the same housing tenements, where 100% of our students were eligible for free lunch. So a very community-based school where we provided before school and after school because we were feeding the kids, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, trying to the best of our ability, but really started to take it seriously. And so toward the end of my first year, when I became a model classroom for our reading program. And so from thereafter, also as new teachers would come in or other teachers would come in or as the coaches would come in for the program, they would always send them to my classroom to observe the way that I was able to work through this program. But being able to see really tangible gains and really being able to see the impact that I was having on the lives of these little humans, you know, was very humbling. Very humbling and very heavy. The burden of shaping these lives and understanding that as an educator, you are in a position of power to do, so much good or so much harm so easily. So really, that is the point. Like, again, probably my first or second data cycle and looking to see how the students were reacting, how their behaviors were changing in the classroom and in the school, and then just recognizing that I could link that immediately to my own behaviors and what I was providing. And then just seeing the power and the responsibility in that.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, first of all. I think that story speaks to me a lot because, you were saying that that first year didn't quite go the way that didn't go quite as well as you'd hoped. You described it as disastrous, and you could have chosen at that point to just get out. You know what I mean? You could have said, oh, no, this isn't for me. But, you got that competitive little, like, no, I want to do better at this. And then you got to see the result it had on the kids. And just, I like the way you described that powerful but heavy burden of the harm or good that you could do as an educator. And yeah, that says a lot to me. But nevertheless, now today you are an assistant superintendent of DE&I at Farmington Schools. And I do have a couple questions just about, what that role is all about and a little bit of history there. And I thought it might be helpful for some folks who might not be super familiar if they're listening to the podcast with DE&I for us to break down just some key terms. So to start, I'm wondering if you could just tell us what DE&I stands for, just in case someone listening doesn't know, and what it means to you as an educator and as someone in this position.
Sure. And lately, even though I guess for copyright infringement reasons, they cannot change my title, but I've been calling it JEDI work, JEDI, where the J stands for justice, the E stands for equity, the D stands for diversity, and the I stands for inclusion. So when I think about JEDI work, again, Justice is ensuring that the other components are met. So when I look at equity is about, for me, every student getting the resources that they need in order to have the outcomes that they want for themselves. So, earlier when we were speaking about the way that we think about what is a successful school and not being test scores and then looking at outcomes for students, to me, it's not even necessarily like the outcomes that are like, we need to see, who graduated from college or, who has a master's degree. It really is, how good were we at helping them to define their passions and use those passions to set goals for themselves, for their life. So when I think about equity, it is about the way that we allocate resources in order to help our students reach their dreams, reach their goals. But really helping them craft goals that make sense for what we know is necessary in order to survive as an adult in life. You have to be able to pay your bills. You have to, be able to do certain things that means that, yes, your passion may be music, but what else could you do besides be a rapper? That type of thing. But equity is just really allocating our resources in a way that matches with our students' needs, their individual needs. Diversity when I look at diversity for myself, and it's the diversity of people, but it's also the diversity of thought, diversity of experiences. So when we look at diversity of people, it's not even just looking at, so within our school system, I'll say within our school system, when we talk about diversity of people, and we look at the multitude of different identities. So it's more than race, it's more than ethnicity. It's also, whether or not they are LGBTQIA plus, or if they fall in that spectrum. It could be diversity within religious beliefs. It could be diversity within political beliefs. These are the types of things that lead to us being able to really encourage critical thinking and civil discourse, two things that are woefully absent in some adult conversations that you may witness or participate in. And really, those are the types of things that help us avoid some of the situations that we get ourselves in that become very painful for people around them. Like we have to learn how to respectfully disagree with others and still see value and worth in people, even when we disagree with them. See how their perspective can still add to your knowledge base, even if you don't adopt it. At least you have a better understanding of it. So, again, diversity also has to do with native language, national origin. And also ability level. So we talk a lot about ableism and the way that there are so many structures that we have created that become barriers, or social structures that make say being neuroatypical or being having a different level of physicality or physical ability, having those things be barriers when they really don't necessarily have to be. If we look at those individuals' strengths and their goals, should they still be able to meet them? Absolutely. Have we created some barriers in some cases that prevent that? Absolutely. So to me, diversity is probably like the widest category to explore, but something that a lot of people have a very narrow view on. Like they automatically think I'm talking about black and white, and I'm usually not. I'm actually usually not. But that's the way that a lot of people see it. And inclusion is really the idea of I really hate the word tolerance. I don't like that. And I know hate is a strong word, so I'll just say I avoid using the word tolerance. And people are like, we are a district in which we are tolerant of everybody. And it's like, I don't ever want to be tolerated. I tolerate my children. That's what I'm like when they come in and I'm annoyed and I allow them to leave the room without going off on them. I have tolerated them, but that doesn't feel like that. If you tolerate me, I don't feel like you're welcoming me. I don't feel like you have open arms toward me. I feel like you're like, you can stay. You're begrudgingly. You can stay. No thanks. I'm not looking for that type of relationship. And I don't think that our children and their relationship with school, it shouldn't feel that way. They shouldn't feel tolerated. They should feel like this is where I belong. And I can tell I belong by the way that my teachers treat me, by the way my parents are treated when they come in the building, by the things that I am taught, by being able to see myself positively reflected in the curriculum, in the physical plant of the building, like on the walls, in the classroom, on the covers of the books, in the library, in the movies that we watch, in the stories that we're allowed to tell about ourselves, that someone is listening to me, to hear me, and to let me know that I belong. That to me is inclusion. Okay. Not just, you're there and you're a part of it. And now we can say we have you over here, no. We believe in inclusion here. We have this black girl with the black book. No, it's also my friends are reading about me. My friends know more about me. My friends are seeing positive stories about people that look like me, and not just stories that make me look like the only thing that I ever was a slave. That's what I'm known for. That's that's all my friends know about Black people, is that they were slaves. It doesn't make you feel like you belong, because that's a narrative that's still different from everyone else's, narrative. If your friends see, and your friends are reading books that highlight and again amplify the fact that you're the same, you might look different, you might have some different things about each other, but you're all human and you're all worthy and you all belong. So that's inclusion.
I'm Nikki Herda, and you're listening to Bright, stories of hope and innovation in Michigan classrooms. Bright is brought to you in part by MEMIC Insurance Company, ensuring the educational community for more than 70 years. Teachers and school employees visit memic.com/quote to see how much you can save. Today, I'm chatting with Dr. Bobbie Goodrum, Assistant Superintendent of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Farmington Public Schools. Up next, we dive into what it means to be an Assistant Superintendent of DE&I, break down a few problematic buzzwords in education, and hear Bobbie's 3 strategies for making sure every student belongs. So I want to know just a little bit more about, what is your role as an assistant superintendent of DE&I?
A lot of my responsibilities really have to do with capacity building. So everybody who knows me knows how I don't like to talk about achievement gap. But there is these pressure again, because we put so much emphasis on test scores to minimize achievement gaps. I'd rather talk about opportunity gaps. Because for me, and again, language is critical. We already talked about tolerance, but when I think about achievement, I think, yes, clearly I'm responsible for my achievement, right? You hold yourself responsible for achievement. So when I think about achievement gap, and a gap, that when we talk about the gap, we're really ascribing it to large groups of people, right? And so it's like this large group of people is somehow responsible for this gap because they're responsible for their own achievement, so they're responsible for this gap, versus an opportunity where opportunity, yes, you are responsible for some of your opportunities, but really opportunities are what are given to you. You're given opportunities. And what we know for sure is that we have opportunity gaps that then may result in some disparate performance on assessments, and we won't even get into the background of how most statewide assessments or standardized tests or things of that nature, what they were founded based upon, or why they were developed. But it's just something. But it is still a measure that people look at when they try to assess how great a school district is or how great a school is. That's one of the things that people look at, the achievement gap, because again, it's easy to quantify certain things. You take numbers and you can put numbers someplace, and people think that they understand the story because they know they can understand that there's a difference between 180, and so it makes them feel like they understand something, but it's a much deeper issue than that. And so in this role is kind of getting to, or these types of roles are getting at the heart of that's a symptom. It's not a problem. That gap is not the problem. It's a symptom, but what is the problem? And the problem is, in some cases, the way that we are teaching all students, the way that we think about all students, the way that we train students to think about themselves, that efficacy. Are we making all students believe that they can do it, or are we just making some students believe that they can do it. And some students were telling them, hey, you're doing, that's it. That's all you can expect to do. It's you, so how are we building up the efficacy of each student? So a lot of times these roles are about capacity building and training, training people to be reflective upon their behaviors, really towards individuals versus groups. And I feel like that is one of the things that people don't understand about these roles. A lot of times when we talk about, say, history, and we might show data about impact like income disparities or housing disparities or incarceration rates or things of that nature. So when we're doing that, it's really to help other people reflect about why they might have preconceived notions about an individual child, because we're doing that so that you can reflect, but we also are still, all of us, telling you every single child is an individual child, and must be looked at as an individual. You should not be looking at so-and-so. You should not look at a student and think they're a Black student and that means this. They're a Latino student and that means this. They're an Asian student and that means this. You really have to take each child based on their individual, value. And so in order to get people to do that, it takes a lot of unteaching. And it takes a lot of personal reflection. But again, what we know is that these one and dones are not effective. Like I can come in every year and do implicit bias training or do some culturally responsive teaching training or things of that nature. But if it's not thread into every policy, into every decision that we make, if it's not something that we're thinking about, we're never going to move the needle, because those types of professional developments, those one-offs where there might be some tears and there might be some reflection, but then if you don't see me for 2 more years, you forgot it. In some cases, somebody may have kept something and have taken it with them, but most of the people are just like, oh, that was heavy. Back to work as usual. Same old behaviors. Nothing has changed. No, students are still performing the exact same way on these assessments. We're teaching the exact same way. We're not integrating things into the curriculum that are going to be meaningful enough for these students in order for it to stick for them, and that type of thing. So we also, many of us do a lot of work with other specialized populations. And when I talk about specialized populations, in this case, again, we don't make these categories up, all right? These are federal categories. All of them are federal categories, and so sometimes we get funds that are specific to those categories. So yes, low-income students, at-risk students. Like there's a bit of money that is just for at-risk students. And at-risk is another term that I am not a fan of. But at-risk students, our English language learners there's a certain amount of federal funds that go into that. Then there are there's ADA, Section 504 of ADA, which, again, are students who may not be eligible for special education, but still have some needs that require accommodation. So we kind of work with those specialized populations. In a way, I would say I always think of myself as being over specialized student services. So services that are, specialized kind of based on some federal identifiers or categories that they've been placed in.
Yeah, there's a lot there I'm thinking of. The one thread that I'm picking up consistently, right, with achievement gap, with at-risk students, with tolerance, you're doing a really beautiful job of even pointing out, to me, things that I didn't think twice of, that I can see what you mean about even what you didn't, explicate on at-risk too much, but even just you kind of lumping it in with that category makes me think, I can see how that would be problematic, because in a way, at least the reading I'm getting is like, the way I interpreted that was, that could be like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. Like you're already labeling them as at risk. So
what you know for sure is it doesn't sound good, right? Like you don't want to be labeled at risk, do you, for anything? Yeah. It does not say, hey, this kid's full of potential. That's not what it says.
Yes. And the same thing with the achievement gap. I think that makes a whole lot of sense. Like, it's the difference between saying it's a subtle variant of placing blame. It's like achievement gap puts it on you, and it's your deficiency, or it could be interpreted that way.
Right. Yeah, it makes it seem like there's a deficiency. Achievement gap, at risk, those type of words to me are the types of things, or even, I mean, and you can't, there's no way to do it, but even when I think about students who are eligible for special education, and you think about disability versus different ability, and, there's all these other words, but the thing is, all of these things kind of pathologize those groups. And we say that there's something wrong with that group that we have to fix. Not there's something wrong with our system that is creating these inequities and these opportunity gaps and these disparities within those groups. It's, again, pathologizing the group, saying there's something wrong with the group that we have to fix. We're putting blame on the group.
Okay, let's dig into our 3 things. So today we're talking about 3 strategies for making sure every student belongs. So what do you got for us for number 1?
Really, the number 1 thing that I'm going to say is to see them. Okay, I'm going to say to see them. And when I talk about see them, I'm speaking of seeing them as an individual. So many times, our students don't feel seen. They don't feel seen. And when I say seen, I mean, don't see, a black woman in front of you. See Bobbie, and in order to see them, that means you have to listen to them. That means that you have to, and hear them and pay attention to them. So seeing them means giving them the opportunity to tell you who they are before you have decided who they are. That's what seeing somebody is. Giving them the opportunity to tell you who they are, and you not trying to tell them who they are, or you not making a decision about who they are. Like that makes a really big difference, to not make assumptions about them based on whatever identifying characteristics or what some other teacher told you about them or what you heard about the family, but allowing that student to be their authentic selves and you seeing them for who they truly are. Okay, so that seeing and listening. The second thing that I would say is to use that information. So once you know who they are, you've seen them, you've listened to them, use that information. And even in seeing, for instance, like I would say, I'm going to use high school as an example because elementary teachers have an opportunity to talk to their students. Let's say they have 30. Let's say it's a school with a real high ratio. It's 35 kids. Within the year, even with 35 kids, you'll get to know them. You should get to know all of them pretty well. At the secondary level, you might have 150 kids. Because you have a different group of kids who are coming in your room every hour, and it's a little bit more difficult to form those relationships. But if you're paying attention, the pay attention piece, and you see a pen, I would say a pen on a backpack is more telling than a t-shirt, because I'm just using my own son he had on a Smashing Pumpkins t-shirt the other day. I was like, oh, you like Smashing Pumpkins? And I'm playing songs. He's like, no, I don't even know who they are. I like the t-shirt. And I was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
You can't trust the t-shirts that the kids are wearing, but if they have a button on their backpack, chances are that's something that they're into. I don't care what you teach. There are ways to integrate student interest into your subject matter. And when you do that, it is more engaging to them, and they are more likely to interact with you, with their classmates, and with the subject matter, and feel, again, like they belong, because it's a piece of them that's integrated into the curriculum. When you see yourself, and when we talk about see yourself, we're not always, again, talking about, oh, there's a black person in there, I see myself. It can be something that you like. It could be something that you're interested in, something that you're passionate. You still are seeing yourself in that content matter. It does not have to be, we really always try to funnel people down to their most visible identity, which may not even be the identity that is most personal or most affirming to them in the way that they see themselves. You know, so the second piece would be to integrate. So one was like see them, listen to them. Two is integrate, and number three is and this is the easiest one to me. You know, and you don't even, if sometimes you don't even have the time to do the first two that I talked about. Just in time, things are busy. The place to start is to care. It's just to care. Just to care. And my goodness, and I don't say this lightly because I really want you to authentically care, but fake it till you make it. And that is saying hello to students, learning students' names, saying goodbye to them as they leave the classroom, asking them how their day is. Just when people, again, and that's almost attached to the C, but the seeing and the listen is a deeper thing. But the caring piece, showing that you care. If you see them with a frown, ask them what's wrong. A lot of times, especially in high school and middle school, students might be resistant to talk to you, but at least they'll remember that you asked and someone cared. Show that you care in any way that you can, because students absolutely feel isolated if no one is speaking to them. It's not even the adults in the class, like if not even the adults in the building are speaking to a student. Can you imagine how isolating that is? You know, it's extraordinarily isolating. There's definitely no sense of belonging that comes along with that. We really have to, as educators, like that's our job. Our job is to teach. And this is one of those corniest things, and I really hate this saying, but this is so true. Like, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Like, that is like one of those kittens hanging on there, hang in there, baby, like very trite sayings, but it is absolutely true. It is absolutely true. If you just speak kindly to them, they will be more responsive. They will be more engaged. They will interact more. They will see themselves in that classroom as a member of that community. They will feel like they belong.
You got me laughing so hard at the kittens. Kittens hanging, because I could picture it so clearly, like kittens with like angel wings in the quote. But sometimes these trite things, sometimes it's like live, laugh, love, and you're like, okay. But, you know, there's truth to that too.
Right,
but
exactly.
Sometimes there's a good reason that these things hang around, because they do point to some very fundamental truth, even if they get cliche in their overusage. So,
exactly.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those 3 strategies with me. And what really strikes me is, you know, you talk a lot about how your role, and this does seem important, really important, that to have somebody as an assistant superintendent at that level, you know, in a district, to be able, because you said all these trainings that you do, right? They're good, they're awesome, but if they're not wrapped into every policy, threaded into every, you know, into evaluations, right, then they're just kind of one-off things. And so it does seem really important, first of all, to have you there, or somebody like you in your position, you know, to be able to influence policy. Because if you can't, then you know, you're not able to fully get across what you're trying to accomplish. But when it comes down to the individual level, what I'm seeing in these strategies is we have a lot of system change to do, right? And that's what you're working on, and there's a lot of people working on fighting that fight. But when it comes down to individual teachers and students, you know, it doesn't have to be, you're saying, don't look at somebody's visible identity and assume it's the one that matters most to them. And it really boils down to what a lot of the teaching advice that you start to hear, and a lot of things that boil over as I'm doing this season with 3 strategies, it does boil down to those relationships, you know. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to, sometimes it's just going back to the heart of the matter, but your stories that you've given and the examples that you've given remind us that's, you know, at the end of the day, when it comes to interacting one-on-one with another human, that's what matters. So thank you.
Exactly.
One question actually I want to ask, if we have time for it, is, can you tell us about a time where you saw a shift in a classroom or a school where a student went from feeling like they didn't belong to developing that sense of belonging? And, if you can think of it, what caused it and why was it such a profound impact on the student? Like, what change did you see in that student?
That is difficult from this stage, because even though I have I say I've written it in my contract but I've been very clear to our superintendent, to our board, that I will only stay in this position if I had certain things, and these certain things are my access to the student clubs. Like, I have a district diversity club, and I have and I also participate in our student roundtable, and these are two kind of district level clubs. Just because I need to be connected to kids. Like, I can't, if I were to sit here and just go training, principals, or just go train teachers, and was not spending time with students at all, I would not do this job. I would not enjoy it. The students still are the reason. Well, they're clearly the reason that I do what I do, but I have to see them. However, I know that okay, so I can give you an example, I guess. Now I can give you an example just based off of something that one of my students said earlier, and she brought it up as a point of pride. So right now, some of our middle school students are beginning to start GSA clubs. And GSA can either stand for, like, we used to think it used to be Gay Student Alliance, but now they're calling it gender and sexuality. Wait, what is it? Gender and sexuality awareness clubs. Really just trying to bring more understanding to the whole spectrum of gender and sexuality, the differences between gender and sexuality, etc. So, one of the students in our diversity club was talking about having that space now, something that she started, at a middle school, which is different, because even though we're seeing presentations of nonconformity as early as elementary school now, elementary parents say are super resistant to really the topic being brought up, because, again, a lot of people conflate sexuality with sex. Like, you can talk about sexual, and they conflate gender and sexuality, and then they conflate sexuality with sex. Like, we're not talking about relationships, We're just saying that, so-and-so, or Anthony now wants to be Tony, and is they, them. And we don't have any student named Anthony, named Tony going through this. I just made that up. Just FYI, everyone, for student privacy rights. But we do have students as early as elementary school whose parents are letting us know that their students' pronouns are them, they, theirs, and are now. So parts of my training and support that I'm providing is for second grade teachers on how they talk to their class about why they call their friend they and not he or she, and that type of thing. So just saying all that to say that, by the time those kids get to middle school, if we're starting in elementary, then maybe it will be different. But for this particular student, being able to have it supported at the school, have allies and co-conspirators join her in her school, to let her know that she was supported, is something that made her feel like she belonged. And again, it's giving her a space. And for students, we need to have safe spaces. But to me, always, we're talking more about brave spaces than safe spaces, just really trying to start off even with the idea of, listen, we can try our best, but I can't ensure everybody's protection everywhere. There are going to be people who don't like what you have to say, or who have an issue with who you are, but you need to be brave enough to be your authentic self. And so she was brave enough to try to create a space that felt safer for her. And so with that, and with support of teachers, and administrators, she felt like that was something she could do. And she did it. And so now she has a place. She created a space for herself because she didn't think one existed.
So I can see definitely how that would be very powerful for that student to have, not only to have the space, but also just to have the teachers support it, have to have some adults in the building supporting it, and then also to be able to, I presume, by virtue of it being a club, have other students that are peers, that they can have these conversations with, that they can build friendships with, whatnot. I wonder, obviously maybe it's too soon to speculate, right? And you can't say anything for sure about this given student. But what impact do you think having these opportunities to feel safe and belong, what impact does that have on a student's education if they can feel that way at school?
So, okay, and hate to give you like we're going to get scientific now, whatever. But when you look at, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so at the bottom is safety, and when they talk about safety, really for that piece of safety, it's like food, shelter, that type of thing. So when we look at learning and we look at your ability to access content and your ability to concentrate on what's at hand and your ability to positively integrate yourself into curriculum and engage with others, like how do you engage with other people if you feel like there's a wall there? And so when we talk about belonging, we're talking about breaking down these walls, because when you don't feel like you belong, you feel like there's a wall around you. And so that wall prevents you both from engaging with other people and engaging in content. So just by virtue of that, and there's a lot of research to support that, like belonging, and belonging is a piece of self-esteem. And all of these things have been found to be factors that impact how a student performs in school.
That's great. You can get scientific on me anytime. Listen. Yeah. All right. Last question. Can you tell me about a teacher who had an impact on your life?
Ooh, I feel bad I feel like this teacher is probably so sick of me saying her name and would like for me to keep her name out of my mouth. I'm talking about Miss Nancy Mays, who was my second grade teacher. This is so funny because when I graduated from Renaissance High School in Detroit, and I had like a 3.8, 3.8 used to be a big deal then, but now there's like 45 AP classes, and so kids are graduating with 5.2s and things like that. But that 3.8 meant something to me, and we were able to bring one teacher, who impacted their life. And I brought Miss Mays, my second grade teacher, to that superintendent's excellence dinner. So, but still, she still is very impactful to me. I skipped from kindergarten to second grade. I did like half a year kindergarten, half a year first grade, because halfway through kindergarten, my kindergarten teacher moved me into first grade. And so second grade was really my first year of school with one teacher. Really, Miss Mays, when I think about, I never had any, so efficacy has never been my issue. Self-efficacy, I'll say, has never been my issue. Like, my identity has always been, from a very young age, my identity was predominantly impacted. My self-identity was all about intelligence. Okay, it was all about intelligence. And I really feel like Miss Mays was the first teacher, and who knows, maybe everybody felt like they were a special genius, and that might be the power. That's really the power, if you can make everybody feel like that. But she made me feel like that, and boy, you couldn't tell me nothing for the rest of my life. Like, still today, no one is able to tell me a thing. I learned, I learned, but I go into learning situations knowing I'm going to learn. And maybe that's piece of it, like that, the importance of learning and continuing learning, and the idea that you can learn from anyone, anywhere, any space, that all the stimuli that you intake, is adds to your learning. And I think that was where that realization started for me in the second grade with Miss Nancy Mays.
Without a doubt, it's challenging work to make sure every student belongs in school, not in spite of their differences, but in active celebration and welcoming of these differences. But with leaders like Bobbie forging our path forward, if there's one thing we're certain of, it's that the future is bright. You know someone who's an inspiring Michigan educator who should be featured on our show? Send us an email at bright@michiganvirtual.org to let us know who they are and why we should interview them. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Bright, Stories of Hope and Innovation in Michigan Classrooms. This podcast is produced by Herbie Gaylord, is hosted by me, Nikki Herda, and is shaped by many of our passionate and talented colleagues. Big thanks to Ed Timke, Cassie Harris, Mabel Fox, Terrence Wilkerson, Anna Boyer, Sarah Hill, and Brandon Batista for their contributions to this episode. Bright is brought to you in part by MEMIC Insurance Company, ensuring the educational community for more than 70 years. Teachers and school employees visit memic.com/quote to see how much you can save. The Bright podcast is made possible by Michigan Virtual, a nonprofit organization that's leading and collaborating to build learning environments for tomorrow. Education is changing faster than ever. Discover new models and resources to move learning forward at your school at michiganvirtual.org.